Good job. They were tough names. Actually, that was our confirmation lesson last week. God's name, I am. The year was 1980. The location, Lake Placid. The event, the Winter Olympics. The sport, hockey. The Americans fielded the youngest team ever in the modern Olympics. Young kids, many of them college students. Some played sort of what we would call kind of hockey that you know, they weren't being paid for, sort of club sport hockey. And they entered that event seated 7th. But they were hoping, as the host country, that they could find their way into the medal round. And they did. And so in a semi-final game, they were matched against a team from the Soviet Union, as it was known at that time. A Russian team with tons of experience. A team that had won 4 straight Olympic gold medals. Many of the players on that team were also on the team that won the last gold medal. No one gave them a chance. The hockey game started, and the Russians, well, they looked a little lethargic. They didn't play particularly well. And at the end of the first period, the score was tied 2-2. But that's okay, because the Russians owned the end of the match. Every match they had played, they owned it. In the second period, they started to exert their dominance, scoring a goal while the Americans scored none. In fact, they were outshot 12-2. And at the end of the second period, Al Michaels, who was announcing the game for ABC, said all of the right things about the American team, that for a young team full of amateurs, they're really giving the Russians all they can handle. They're putting up a great fight. And then the third period started. Everybody saw the handwriting on the wall. The Russians would dominate. But for some strange reason, the American team is the one that came out on fire. They quickly scored a goal, slapping it over the shoulder of the goalie. And suddenly it was tied 3-3. And with 10 minutes left, a fellow whose first name is Mike intercepted a pass, went in, slapped it past the pads. And all of a sudden, the U.S. was up 4-3. But there were 10 minutes left. And even though I was watching this on television, there was a sense of anxiety, a sense of, oh my, could this possibly happen? Could a ranked amateur team actually beat a team full of not just veterans, but professionals? They traded hits. And in the last minute, there was a fury on the part of the Russians. slapping puck after puck at the net. And finally, with about 5 seconds left, the U.S. got control of the puck. They slapped it all of the way down the ice. And the crowd started to count down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Al Michaels got so excited, he literally screamed, "Do you believe in miracles?" That game would forever be known as the Miracle on Ice. The underdog story. I love underdog stories. If I don't have any skin in the game, I always cheer for the team that's supposed to lose. That's kind of who we are. We're kind of an underdog nation. I mean, we started as tremendous underdogs. A bunch of farmers up against a bunch of veteran British troops. We're the ultimate underdogs. We love the underdog. It's a part of the reason I have such disdain for the Dallas Cowpies. The New York Yankees. You know, it's interesting, if the NFL would have started 50 years ago instead of 100 years ago, Green Bay would never have a team, and Russ would be sitting here today. Just saying. They wouldn't get a team. There are 7.5 million people that live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's less than 6 million that live in the whole state of Wisconsin. It's what's known in the annals of marketing as small market venues. It's the large market venues that have all the money. That's why they're always in the playoffs. And yet, why isn't Green Bay America's team? I mean, if there's ever an underdog, and they've done as much as the Dallas Cowpies. Yes, Dallas has won 5 Super Bowls, but the Green Bay Packers have won 4 in a small market. Underdog stories. Well, if you love underdog stories like I do, today's text from Luke is the ultimate underdog story. It's about a woman, a widow. And she's demanding justice from a judge who could care less. Now we have to understand something about widows in first century Judea. They had no rights. They had no voice. In fact, they didn't even exist. When her husband died, all of his inheritance would have gone to his eldest son. If he didn't have an eldest son, it would have gone to his eldest brother. It would have been up to them to show some generosity to the widow. And obviously in this case, though we don't know because Jesus never shares that information, but apparently they weren't fulfilling any obligation to the widow. And she would quite literally starve to death without somebody caring for her. And so every day she goes to this judge, demanding justice. And she finally just wears him down to the point where he just wants to get rid of her. She's a pest. An insignificant nothing, but she keeps bothering him, and so he finally grants her justice just to shut her up. There was a movie. A movie about a young man whose name was Andy. wrongly convicted of killing his wife and his wife's boyfriend. And so he is given 2 consecutive life sentences in Shawshank Prison. The movie, based upon a book actually written by Stephen King, didn't do so well when they released it until it started receiving some awards. Andy shows up for his first day in prison. And there's a group of sort of old, wily veterans who've been in this prison forever, and they look at all of the newbies coming in, and they try to predict whether they're going to make it or not. And they all look at Andy, and old Red, who's played by Morgan Freeman, says, "He ain't going to make it." Well, Andy was a banker. And one day a guard's having some problems. He got an inheritance and he didn't want to give it all away to the government in taxes. So Andy helped him set up some things so that he'd be able to retain more of his own money. And word started to get around, and other guards started to seek him out to get some financial help. And finally he comes to the attention of the warden. The warden, like the judge in our text, the warden was a man who had no respect for anyone. He feared neither God nor other people. In fact, he was a crook. He would bid county jobs using labor from his prison, thus undercutting his competitors and pocketing the money. And he took Andy and he set up Andy as his own personal accountant. And so Andy was laundering all of his money to different accountants. And to reward him, he put him in charge of the prison library. And he noticed that the library, though there had been funds authorized, the library had never been updated. And so he started to write a letter. One letter every week to the governor. Now the governor could have cared less about prisons. No governor wants to spend a dime on a prison. But every week, the letters came. Over a process of years, the letters came every week demanding that the governor fulfill his obligation to the prison. So finally, just simply running out of patience with Andy, the governor releases some funds for some books. Andy responds by writing not 1 letter a week, but 2. Over and over and over. Today's text is supposed to be about prayer, but it's not actually about prayer. It's about persistence. I'll be the first to acknowledge I don't get the whole thing with prayer. I had a conversation with my wonderful, remarkable, incredible, stupendous confirmation kids last Wednesday night, which, by the way, confirmation next Sunday. And we were talking about prayer. I'm not sure why I should have to beg God to do his job. I mean, doesn't God know what's going on? That's what one of my confirmation students said. God knows everything. God knows what's going on. Why should I have to beg God to do his job? Now, I've heard all the platitudes about prayer. Please spare me. My first parish, I was doing a Bible study. We talked about prayer, and I shared with them sort of my struggle with prayer. And one young lady stood up and said, "Whoa, God answers all of my prayers." I said, "Well, good for you." Every time I go to the mall, she said, I always pray to Christ just as I'm driving in to give me a spot right by the front door. And sure enough, every time I had a spot right by the front door. And I wanted to say so desperately, I don't think you're getting the whole thing of prayer. See, I open the newspaper, I listen to the news. And I see stories of injustice. I read people who talk about the condition of our world, the tremendous injustice. I see the horrendous conditions in which far too many young children in our world live. And it seems to me like God's sleeping. I pray. And all I hear are sounds of silence. But this text really isn't about prayer. It's about losing heart. We almost miss those words. It's about losing heart. Jesus knows what his disciples are about to face. He knows. And he's telling them that sometimes when things are darkest, when sometimes things are most outside of our control, being persistent in prayer keeps us from losing heart. You see, the woman never lost heart. Every day she went, knowing she was up against overwhelming odds, every day she went and demanded justice. Andy never lost heart. Persistence keeps us from losing heart. Continuing on, even in the face of overwhelming odds to the contrary. Our persistence keeps us from losing heart. It's easy to throw the towel in. Would have been easy for the American team just to not show up for the third period. But persistence. It's about persistence. It's about continuing to pray, even in face of overwhelming odds to the contrary, lest we lose heart. Mother Teresa once said, we pray as if everything depends upon God, and we work as if everything depends upon us. And so we pray.